Hello there. Thank you for joining me for a brand new edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. We have a brand new feature on this week's show. It's called our Telile 24/7 Municipal Roundtable. We'll be getting together with municipal leaders and councillors to talk about issues that matter to them and we hope matter to you as well. We kick things off with Warden Mombourquette of Richmond County and Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton talking about affordable housing in the Strait Area. We'll also speak to Deacon Tom Syllaboy of the Diocese of Antigonish about plans for the upcoming Mission to St. Anne at Potlotek First Nation. It's returning after an absence caused by the pandemic last year. But first, we begin in Potlotek First Nation with a very different sort of ceremony on a very different Canada Day. July 1st wasn't the traditional Canada Day in many parts of our country because of the discoveries of hundreds of remains of children that were found at residential school sites in the western part of the country. Potlotek First Nation didn't hold standard Canada Day ceremonies as a result. Instead, they gathered hundreds of people to make a march from the main Potlotek Community Hall up to Mi'kmaq School to speak about the importance of remembering the residential schools and the damage they have done to Indigenous communities and people across the country. Let's go to Potlotek First Nation right now to see how July 1st was marked this year. This Canada Day, orange instead of the traditional red and white took center stage. That was especially the case for marches held between Wagoba and Wagmatcook First Nation on Highway 105, and here in Potlotek First Nation, orange ruled the day as close to 200 people gathered in the parking lot at the Potlotek Community Hall before taking to the streets. They marched on behalf of hundreds of residential school students who never made it home to their families. 251 discovered at the site of Kamloops Residential School site in British Columbia in late May. 751 discovered by the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan in June. The night before this July 1st remembrance in Potlotek, 182 unmarked graves found near the site of the residential school in the Cranbrook area of British Columbia. Only a few weeks after this march was held, another 160 unmarked graves were found on the grounds of the former Cooper Island Indian Industrial School just off Vancouver Island, BC. The march eventually reaches this spot, Mi'kmaq School, constructed and opened after the last residential schools in Canada closed down in 1997. But the sting of the residential schools is still strong for many that have gathered here. Chief Wilbert Marshall, seen here speaking to Richmond Warden Mombourquette, recalls the time that his family was visited by the horrors of the residential schools, and his grandfather decided to do something about it.
You know, I heard my parents, Indian Asian, would come to their house. My grandfather, actually, we're the lucky ones, because he took my mother was saying this to me. He said, your grandfather had a rifle. He said, and they're taking our kids nowhere. He said, I got 3 bullets here, 1 for each one of you guys. And this is the stuff we had to share. We heard growing up. It wasn't lies, it was the truth. And when you have an elder talking to you, tears going down their eyes, you know they're not lying, they're telling the truth. You know, and from this day now, and I hope they listen better now.
The crowd in attendance then listened to the words of 2 Mi'kmaq elders from Potlotek First Nation. Bernadette Marshall, herself a residential school survivor, spoke of the questioning she has been receiving from other media representatives about the concept of many communities across the country canceling Canada Day activities this year to provide a day of reflection for what has happened in the country's residential schools. Asked for her own personal views on Canada Day the day before on CBC Radio, Marshall didn't waste any time getting to the point.
It means nothing to me. Canada Day is nothing to me. Always was, always wasn't, because I grew up with Tom Marshall, my dad, former chief, and I grew up with Rosie Marshall and Sandy Marshall, who drilled it in my head. Nunagil. Always be proud of being Mi'kmaq. Always keep your head up high. Always be proud. And that's what I tried to do for my parents. So I'll tell you what Canada Day means to me. It means absolutely nothing. It's a day of mourning for our children. We're so fortunate. We have so many children here. They could have been at residential school. You know, when you look at these, like it breaks me. It breaks me. I've had to call the National Crisis Line after they found the first few bodies of the children in Kamloops. I was so upset because I was the first one to know. They were sending texts to me at middle of the night, like stuff like that. So I was upset. And before I can heal and before I know all Indigenous people will heal, the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church have to acknowledge the genocide against our people. The government of Canada and the royals, since, you know, that was their whatever, right? Everybody has to acknowledge they committed genocide. And genocide means murdering of people. And that kills me. They murdered our children. For what? For what? Because they wanted to get rid of the Indian problem. That's the bottom line. We were a nuisance to the Canadians, the settlers that came across. We were a nuisance. We were shameful. You know, I always felt the shame of being Mi'kmaq for a certain length of time, being a teenager. I wanted to be white like my friends. They were white friends. But then my grandmother, I told her one day, why am I not Aglasia, Gijo? Because you're old, no, stupid. And that's it. That was the end. And after that, always be proud of who you are, being Mi'kmaq, your language. I've never lost my language. I've kept up with my language, and I'm learning more of my language, talking to my elders. I'm in a position now of being president of Nova Scotia Native Women that I can speak. I can let out all this anger I've been feeling in my heart forever. So today is a day of reflection and a day of mourning for our children. And we might not be living in Kamloops, British Columbia, or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. We are all Indigenous people across this Turtle Island are all brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters, and our neighboring communities, they've accepted who we are. It doesn't mean nothing to them. We're all one. But I'm special because we're all Mi'kmaq. We're special. Always think I'm a special person.
Following Bernadette Marshall's remarks, more strong words came from fellow Potlotek First Nations elder Robert Pictou.
One time, when a white man came to this land, it was all Native people. But when they came to this land, they was awful sick. They was dying of scurvy. And our people brought them back to health. And in return, look what they done. Look what they done to our people. After we brought them people almost from death's door, way back, you know, they went, when they landed in our land, they put a stick in the ground. They said, hey, we claimed this land. It was never given to them. It was never bought. They stole this land. Everybody must remember that. This is stolen land. The government never paid for it. Nobody paid for it. They're killing people and trespass on their land. They're killing people that just want to walk on their land. And I done a ceremony one time. I told them, God, you fellas are all like this here. You don't own no land. The land owns you. And when you die, the land is going to claim you. You're going to put in that hole, and the land is going to wrap its arms around you. That's it. What are you going to do? You can't say, oh, I'm not going to die yet. It's my land. There's no such thing as you own land. You don't. Niskum is the only one that owns this land. And he put us here to survive. And in Nova Scotia, he put the native people. And they knew how to survive out of the water and out of the woods. They made a living. and some other people came and thought they could do better. Look what they done. They turned everything upside down. So when you get home, or when these little children have children, always remember this. This land belongs to the Creator and only the Creator. He put the Native people on this land to take care of the land. You don't own it. Now here it is on the residential. We're here on the residential school losing our kids. And we'll lose more and more if the government don't step in and get off your lazy ass and do something.
And with that, the hundreds of people in attendance made their way back to the Potlotek Food Bank location next to the community hall. A barbecue was serving up hot dogs, and for just a moment, it seemed like any other Canada Day, as people from across the community gathered together. But with the remains of hundreds of children now entering the thousands, showing up at residential school sites across our country, the sea of orange that greeted Potlotek First Nation and many other communities across the country on July 1st is unlikely to abate anytime soon as Canada comes to grips with its mistakes from the past. In Potlotek First Nation for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook. A very different ceremony will come to Potlotek First Nation at the end of July and the early days of August, but it's one that the community has become familiar with over the decades, the annual Mission to St. Anne. St. Anne is the patron saint of Indigenous Canadians, and the people of Potlotek First Nation have gathered on Chapel Island at the actual chapel for many years to celebrate both what St. Anne means to the community and to get together with their fellow Mi'kmaq friends, family, and neighbors. We decided to speak this year to one of the organizers for the Mission to St. Anne. He's Tom Syliboy. 2 years ago, he was ordained as a deacon for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Antigonish. But his history with the Mission to St. Anne goes many, many years before his ordination. Let's hear Deacon Tom Syliboy share his story and talk about the upcoming Mission to St. Anne right now. And we're pleased to be joined today on Telile 24/7 by Deacon Tom Syliboy, who is speaking to us from his office in Eskasoni and is one of the key organizers of this year's Mission to St. Anne in Potlotek First Nation. Deacon Syliboy, thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
All right, it's a great pleasure to have you, and you have a lot of history with this event, so you've seen it over the years and been involved at the organizational level. I want to ask you, how difficult is it to make the decision to have an event like this during the pandemic times? We're in phase 4. We've been able to open up a little bit. The gathering limits have been opened up. But can you give me a sense of what went on in terms of the decision-making process between yourself and the other organizers to say, we can go ahead with the event this year? What was involved there?
I think it's mostly the first thing we have to look at was safety people. So when we're going into phase 3, the people, the elders were kind of asking if there's going to be a mission this year. Last year, we didn't have the other reserves, First Nations to come in. But I know the Potlotek First Nation, they did their mission there. And Eskasoni did their own, and the other reserves did their own missions. That's what happened, but mostly we're trying to kind of really look at, what the others want. So we kind of made that decision. The executive of the Grand Council, we sat down and we talked about the procedures of what the province wants. We looked at the safety. So the other organization reserves were kind of saying, okay, we'll help you if we could. So majority of our people had vaccination. That's going to help out a lot. So in the First Nations, because we had the 2 vaccines, that kind of going to help us to make that. We made that decision because of that. That our people had vaccination.
Based on statistics that I've been seeing, I do understand that First Nations seem to be leading the rest of the country in terms of getting vaccinations and getting the 2 doses. Did that make it easier for you folks to be able to look and say, we can do this, even if it's with reduced numbers this year? Did that help at all?
When we looked at our First Nations communities, I think it's more, I think it was more, we kind of looked at, I think it's just going back to safety again. It's, you know, we just looked at as that base of just to get together, you know, and our mission has been happening since 1751 when we moved there.
Let's pick up on that a little bit, Deacon Silboy, if I could, and talk about the importance of the mission to St. Anne to the people of Potlotek First Nation, but also to Indigenous people all the way around Cape Breton, all the way around Unama'ki, and all the way around the region and the world, really, because you get people coming from great distances to take part. Why do you think that this event is so important and has become so important to the community and to the general Mi'kmaq Nation over the years?
I think it goes back in 1610 when our chief member was baptized in Port Royal, and with his 20 or 22 of his family. And from there, the nations just went in like fire. Everybody got baptized. So in 1629, we adopted Saint Anne as our patron saint. Because in our culture, grandmothers are really very respected in our First Nations. So in other words, Saint Anne is Jesus Christ's grandmother. That's Mary's mom. So that's why we celebrate, and we go back and we just celebrate that mission. And obviously, but the missionaries were there 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s. So and that's where we are right now with that.
The Diocese of Antigonish has been involved in this mission for several decades. And I mean, we've seen not only many priests come and taking part, but also the bishops through the years have come to the Mass that helps close off the ceremonies. You now have been a deacon of the Catholic Church. Why do you think that this means so much for the Roman Catholic Church and the Diocese of Antigonish to be taking part in this ceremony? What do you think is the importance there?
We invite the First Nations, the Grand Chief, but we invite the priests and the bishop. If the priest is from doing Mass with First Nations member too, we will invite the priest from there, Eskasoni, Chapel Island, you know. We invite the priest, and sometimes the bishop. We invite the bishop, and it's not a, you know, it's not a diocese thing. Mostly the First Nations run it.
They are there as guests by invitation of the First Nations.
Exactly.
We were talking just before we began this interview, Deacon Silboy, and you and I actually have a shared history at this event. You were telling me that you first started getting involved back in the early 90s, and I actually covered the mission to St. Anne for the first time in 1993. I was working for CIGO Radio in Port Hawkesbury at the time. It was my first summer there. So we both have known for a long time that this is a special event. So what can you tell me about your personal ties to this event and how it has touched you over the years as you've gone back year after year?
Well, first of all, I will take you back when I was 6 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay. I used to be an epileptic. I used to have epileptics until I was 6 years old. The story is, this is a true story. my grandmother took me to the mission church, say in Chapel Island, on the island. And I remember she was telling me this enigma. Just pray for Saint Dan to intercede, have his grandson to help us. And I remember, this is my mom telling me this. I don't remember when I went to, there's a fountain at the, where when you did those beaches, there's a rock there when they put holy water there. That was made, I think it was 1942, 47 I'm sure, by Leo J. Keats, that he kind of put the holy water there. So what I was told that I was in there, and I don't remember that. Somebody wanted to get my mom, and from there I got. When I left St. Dan's Mission, that was my last episode of epilepsy. So then I went there every year, and it was not only my testimony, people, our Mi'kmaq people had there.
So many people have experienced it in many different ways over the
different
years
ways.
after that first time that you had it as well too. Yeah.
Exactly.
You were telling me as well that when you were first involved in an official capacity, you were doing so as part of a police presence that was there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. The Grand Chief approached me. Grand Chief Don Marshall approached me, and he told me that I could give you a job. I told him, sure. I didn't know what it was. I thought I might as well maybe picking up some garbage over there or so, whatever. He said to me that one of our members are retiring today, and I told him, okay. He said, we want you to, the captains, we've been looking at you, and we would mind you to help us. Sure. So from there, I became chief of police of the Grand Council until 2005. Then I became of the Grand Council. I think the first weekend I wanted to quit because it was too much.
Oh, really?
It was too much. Fighting going on, drinking. There's a lot of stuff going on. But I had, the first year I had around close to 30 security. And I divided maybe 5 or 6 of each reserve to Chapel Island,
Yeah.
They helped me. Because why I use that, because they know their people. They know their community members.
Yeah.
So I kind of used that, and that kind of helped. And over the years, it just now it's so peaceful now, and but they still have a few incidents, but not violent. The other guy's doing down. He's doing very well. Yeah. So it's learning experience as we go, as we had to learn, as I went.
Yeah.
This.
Exactly. And I mean, that kind of thing will happen when there are large crowds there. But as we're wrapping up, you talked a little earlier on about the importance of simply being together. And I think that's something that we can all reflect on, especially as we're into this latest stage of the pandemic. We're having restrictions lifted. We're able to gather in larger groups than we were. How important do you think it is, as we wind things down here, just to have the people have the chance to get together in Potlotek First Nation and literally on Chapel Island for that last mass service as we wind down the mission this year?
You know what? It's so good. It was something like this for me anyway, personally. Even though we didn't have a whole community's mission in Chapel Island. Some went, but there was a lot of precautions going on. It was like, everybody was scared, especially the elders. Elders were scared to go, and children. And so to me, it's so, I'm so glad that, that we made that decision, and I know the Creator will help us, to keep us safe. I have faith.
Well, we hope that's the case, and we've covered a lot of ground here in just a short time, Deacon Syliboy, and I do appreciate you giving me some time. Did you want to add anything else about all of this just before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say that, pray for us too, and our leaders. We have to work together.
That's Deacon Tom Syliboy from his office in Eskasoni. We've been speaking to him by Zoom this morning. Stay tuned for more of Telile 24/7 in just a moment. And now it's time for a brand new feature here on Telile 24/7, the Municipal Roundtable. For our first installment, we're talking about affordable housing. It's been an issue that's been at center stage for Richmond Municipal Council and the town of Port Hawkesbury for quite a while now. But it took on added significance over the last couple of weeks as the Strait Richmond Housing Matters Coalition put out a statement calling on the federal and provincial governments to act on several recommendations that have been made by affordable housing coalitions across the country. To talk about these issues and see where we're going in the Strait Area with affordable housing, I sat down recently with Richmond County Warden Amanda Mombourquette and Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. Here's that conversation, our first Municipal Roundtable, right now. Joining us for our first ever edition of the Telile 24/7 Municipal Roundtable are two municipal leaders who have put affordable housing at the top of their agendas and those of their councils. We're pleased to welcome the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. Hello, Brenda.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for joining us. And also on the line today, we're very pleased to have the Warden for Richmond County, Amanda Mombourquette. Amanda, thank you for coming in.
That's my pleasure. Great to see you.
All right. So we have a lot to talk about. And one of the things that we're talking about, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have affordable housing as the first topic for a municipal roundtable, is because of a release that came out from the Strait Richmond Housing Matters Coalition a little earlier this month. And I will throw it to Amanda first, because Amanda is, of course, the current chair of the Strait Richmond Housing Matters Coalition, I should say. Brenda, the outgoing chair. Amanda, you and your colleagues want to see the provincial and federal governments taking some action, and you've noticed a couple of policy papers being put out at each level in recent weeks. So can you tell me a little bit about what exactly the coalition would like to see happening and how that ties in to what your municipality and municipalities here in the Strait would like to see in terms of affordable housing?
Sure. Adam, I guess the first thing I would begin with is by saying, I think when we were all on the campaign trail just under a year ago for the municipal election, housing kept coming up. I mean, every one of the councillors, I think, around our table heard from their constituents that, the affordability of being able to live here, that even the availability of places to rent, let alone buy, is becoming more and more of a challenge. And so it's definitely been kind of a top of mind for us since October. Recently, of course, we saw that the provincial government released the report from the Affordable Housing Commission. And, we were really, really happy to see that, the results of that commission coming out in a very timely manner. There were 17 recommendations put forward. Our coalition met to review those recommendations in pretty great detail, because it's obviously a concern in this region. And we found a couple of things, I guess, that we really caused us a little bit of concern. And so, the fact that of those 17 recommendations, only 3 were identified as short-term actions gave us a little pause, because this is not a challenge that needs to be addressed tomorrow. It needs to be addressed today. And so, we were a little concerned about the lack of short-term actions identified. I think we were also, we would have liked to see, a stronger recognition of the potential role of nonprofits in resolving the housing challenge. Sanavac's extension right now has a project underway called Build Together, and what they've discovered, and I'm sure it's not a comprehensive list, but there's at least 196 housing-related groups working in Nova Scotia, and those efforts are not coordinated right now at a provincial level. And we really feel like there is an opportunity to have a provincial strategy that engages those nonprofits in a more productive way together. And I guess the other thing I would say that we were a little concerned about is the potential for downloading of responsibility to municipalities. I think there's some really excellent opportunities for leadership that are identified in the report that municipalities could be taken. But we need to remember that we need a provincial strategy on this matter. It's impacting all of Nova Scotia, and as such, we really feel strongly that the province needs to remain the lead on it.
I want to shift over to you, Brenda, if I could, because this is not a new problem. And I think that's one of the issues that really is coming to the forefront, as Amanda mentioned, that the two of you and your fellow council candidates encountered this on the campaign trail last October. Does it seem like there's more of an awareness now than there ever has been just among the general public? And does that make the role of the Strait Richmond Housing Matters Coalition more important at this particular time?
Well, thank you for that question. And I do, of course, echo everything Amanda has said already. And I will say that when I entered into the municipal realm of politics back in 2012, I was hearing the exact same things at doors and Amanda was hearing in 2020. And at that time, very much so, we were hearing all kinds of anecdotal stories about housing gaps, shortages, about affordability, lack of options, and some of the options that were in use just, certainly were perhaps subpar and in need of, just to make them more livable and adequate. So these were some of the anecdotal stories that were shared at doors. And throughout my first term on council, I had the great fortune of kind of having some in-depth conversations around housing with Celeste Gotel, who works with public health. And at that time, we were able to kind of mobilize some of our other service, organizations that do kind of provide services, and their direct responsibility isn't necessarily housing, but housing has a direct impact on a lot of the organizations that operate here in our region and across the province. And we ended up hosting a housing think tank. So as a result of that event, and having kind of very frank conversations around more anecdotal stories around housing and the experiences that First Voice people are having around housing, as well as what the organizations are seeing and experiencing around housing. That's how the Strait Richmond Housing Matters Coalition kind of came to be. And we've continued that conversation around our table to really try to kind of understand, what are the challenges, but also what are the opportunities? Like, what are the subsequent steps that we need to take to create a more enabling environment around encouraging both private sector and the not-for-profit sector to meet the needs that we have as a community around housing. And Amanda can probably talk a little bit about the service-based counts project that we have on the go as a coalition. This is definitely a very significant step in understanding and having hard data kind of to back up the anecdotal stories.
Well, let's look at the idea of data collection, though, because that's important and critical to being able to see housing development happen across the Strait Area and across the province, is knowing who needs to be served. What can you tell us about that particular project with the coalition, Amanda?
Yeah, so I mean, Mayor Brenda's exactly right. We've got some great anecdotal stories, and those stories are extremely important in making sure that we don't forget that there are human beings experiencing these challenges. Because we don't want to get caught up in stats and forget that this is people's, lives and health and housing that are at risk. So, what we decided to do a number of months back was apply for some funding through CLARI, which is a Change Lab Action Research Institute, and we've landed a few dollars to conduct some specific research. And from a research methodology perspective, what it will do is that project will enable us to work with service providers for a solid month. We plan to do it this fall. And they will be submitting data based, related to housing based on the experiences of the clients that they are working with. So that will give us a really good picture of what are some of the numbers related to housing. Some time ago, I think I had spoke with the director of the Cape Breton Housing Authority, and he mentioned that they're not including transfers. There were something like 38 people on a wait list for public housing at that time in Richmond County alone, right? And so we need more of those kinds of pieces of statistical information. And I guess the reason we need that is because if we're going to be asking government to change policy and to invest, if we're going to be asking the private sector to invest, we need to make sure that we're presenting them with accurate information on what the market looks like here, what's needed, what's really needed, and so that we can figure out ways to fill those gaps.
Just quickly, Amanda, before we leave that topic, you mentioned that the data collection was going to be happening in the fall. Can you give me a sense on when you hope to have finalized figures from that particular survey?
So the month we're looking at specifically right now is October. I should mention also, Adam, this is a partnership with CBU, Nova Scotia Health is participating as well. But we're really fortunate because they've done this type of count in CBRM in the past. They've got some expertise around it, and so now what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to expand that CBRM count and have data collection for the whole eastern region. So it'll include the Guysborough and Antigonish counties, which is really exciting, but also able to break it down by municipal unit. I would suggest that the results, would probably be early in the new year before we would be ready to share them. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing those. And Brenda, the town of Port Hawkesbury actually just completed its own housing survey, asking residents what they feel the needs are and asking them to tell them their own particular needs. Can you talk a little about that and about what the town is doing at this moment to try to address affordable housing issues, specifically in Port Hawkesbury?
Sure. So we worked closely with the Cape Breton Partnership, and we did release a survey that ran until, I believe, April 21st, I believe was the cutoff date. And basically the intent of the survey was to identify, basically take the pulse of exactly what is the need for housing in the town. And it wasn't only I guess we weren't only targeting people who live in the town, we were targeting people who also live in the region and maybe beyond, and inviting people who are actively looking for a place to live in the town of Port Hawkesbury to fill out the survey, to let us know, what are your needs, what kind of housing is it that you would prefer, stuff like, do folks want pet-friendly options, or, is there any need around accessibility? And we looked at as well who are the people, and Amanda mentioned, these are real people who are facing housing challenges, and a lot of people are either precariously housed, some are homeless, and some are probably living outside their means in terms of affordability. So being able to kind of capture that a blueprint in time of exactly what that housing need looks like, again, to push it beyond the anecdotal and to have that data that we can understand as a town and as a council, but also that we can present to developers to say, here is some demonstrated need. And what was really cool about the survey that we hosted in partnership with the Cape Breton Partnership was that we added an element to the survey that allowed for the survey respondents to volunteer their contact information to give permission that if a new housing development were to be made available, that they would give permission to have their contact information shared with potential developers. So at the end of the day, it's about creating that enabling environment so that we can, work with or do our best to maybe minimize some risk to developers who may be interested in new housing projects in the town, and maybe provide them with an opportunity to have some kind of set occupancy before they launch any kind of particular housing projects, or even understand what their target could be in terms of housing projects. So, how many seniors of the 650 survey respondents that we had are looking for housing? What kind of housing? What's their price points? So these are kind of some of the data that we were able to gather in the survey. And where we are now, I didn't forget that part of your question. Where we are now is kind of working on a strategy for how we are going to how we're going to take what we've learned from this survey and how do we share this information with both citizens and with the developers and with all the stakeholders that are involved with housing. And I know as Amanda and I guess, continue this municipal adventure that we're on, I think it's very clear to see that housing is very much touches almost every file that we work on in our municipalities and files that we work on together. It really is, we're at a really critical point in time where if the end game is to grow our population, because people are our number one resource. If it's about growing our population, we need to get the housing thing right, because we need to have a place, we need to have a home for people, and it's critical.
In that spirit, I wanted to ask the two of you, and either of you jump in whenever you feel like it. What are the unique challenges for your municipality in terms of bringing developers in, but also making sure that you do meet the needs of the people there? Can Amanda or Brenda, either of you can go first. What do you feel are the challenges in terms of addressing affordable housing needs in your municipality?
Well, I can jump in if that's okay, Brenda. I think one of the things that we run into right off the bat is some of our aging infrastructure and the limitation of our water and sewer infrastructure. When developers are looking to put new multi-unit facilities in the locations, they're often looking for water and sewer infrastructure. And like I said, ours is aging, but we also have the added complication that not the entire county is not served by such services. And so that creates a whole other level of complexity and, I guess, investment challenge that investors will need to deal with. I think we also need to look at more clearly what our zoning looks like throughout the county. And I know we have a joint project underway to do that, but these are things that are going to take time.
Brenda, same question to you. What are the issues in Port Hawkesbury specifically?
Well, some of the challenges that, we are kind of exploring at our housing advisory committee level is kind of around, how we are purposefully engaging with investors and developers, and how we can do a better job at marketing the town, how we can streamline the ability to assist developers and investors to create a one-stop shop, so that we're able to address zoning, we're able to address and provide information on the available land that perhaps the municipality owns or perhaps it is privately owned, so that the information we're giving is both quick and current. And so that we are, because housing really is a priority that our council has set for this term and last term, and we really want to kind of move the needle and ensure that Amanda was exactly correct. The province really needs to show that true leadership in addressing the housing challenges and crisis that we're experiencing throughout the province and in our municipalities. But however, like, we need to do a little bit of a reimagining around, you know, what can municipalities do at the grassroots level to kind of empower ourselves to create that enabling environment to, you know, and to make sure that there's not only interest from the private sector, but to also work with our not-for-profit housing-based groups as well, like the Coalition, you know, like New Dawn, so that we, you know, we are making sure that we are not dropping any potential opportunities and that we're exploring as many leads as possible.
Mm-hmm. Brenda, I want to stay with you on that point just for a moment, although I'll pose the question to the two of you. You talked a bit about the province stepping up. We are, of course, just a few days into a provincial election. And I recall that not all that long ago, the provincial government did commit $1.2 million to the owners of the Breton Apartments complex on Queen Street in Port Hawkesbury to renovate 24 units, 12 of which will be designated as affordable housing units. With that in mind, I want to ask each of you, starting with Brenda, do you feel it's incumbent on the provincial and federal governments to take a leadership role here? Is it up to the developers? Do municipal leaders like yourselves basically headhunt potential developers to try to see the interest? I mean, who should be bearing the responsibility, or is it a matter that it has to be a complete team effort?
I believe 100% that this has to be a big team effort with kind of well-defined roles. And I know that the report that was released kind of identified some potential directions, and Amanda certainly spoke very well to with regard to some of the challenges that we kind of see in moving forward. But at the end of the day, we really need all of the players involved that are most impacted with regard to housing to play a role in improving housing. And I will say that if I look back in time in 2012 and envision where we are today in 2021, to be at a point in time where we have people who want to move to our communities and they want to be a part of our municipalities. And we have that huge potential around population growth. We, you know, isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful challenge to have. So we're now at a point where we really have to dig in and figure out, you know, how are we going to make sure that we're ready to accept that interest and to grow our communities in a substantial way. And housing is such an important piece in population growth. And, you know, in fairness, as I kind of been on this municipal adventure since 2012, I'm learning more and more exactly how critical housing is to really even economic growth to everything. It touches everything.
Amanda, same question to you quickly from the Richmond County perspective. And I say this knowing that your municipality is taking a lead role in looking at potential housing options, even looking at the former school building in Evanston to try to do something with that. And I'm just wondering there, do you feel that it winds up being the municipality that has to take that role? Do developers have to take the role? Federal or provincial government? Your thoughts there?
Well, again, I don't think there's a silver bullet on this. I think the former school in Evanston is a unique opportunity, just with its proximity, especially to the Strait Richmond Hospital. We're still in the middle of an assessment process on that building, so we don't have any firm plans about it. But certainly at the last council meeting, housing is definitely something that came up as an opportunity to be looking at repurposing that building. And I think programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative and the affordable housing sort of demonstration projects at the provincial level could be a direction that we go in there. We just need that assessment done first. One thing I would say about, specifically related to the election and the coalition and the role of the coalition in this whole process, this is where the rubber kind of hits the road for us in terms of advocacy. This is a huge opportunity I was super impressed with the advocacy work that the coalition members did during the municipal campaign. I think I learned more from the coalition in those, in that short period of couple of months than I had in the past several years before it. So they know how to do a bang up job of advocacy, and that's essentially the direction we're going to be taking now. Is we've kind of canvassed our members. What's the question that you would pose to the representatives? We're going to be packaging that and sharing that information with the entire coalition. And that's how we plan to make housing an election issue in this region. Sure, certainly, is to keep that pressure up so that we're all on the same page, asking the same questions, and setting the expectation, I guess, with the candidates that we're going to be expecting some action on this. That's really important. And I think also, a big part of our role is on making sure that the decision makers and the policy makers, they know what precarious housing looks like in a rural setting as opposed to an urban setting, because it is a little different. We see a lot of folks in this region who are in situations where they're couch surfing, where families are having to kind of split up sometimes to stay with relatives because they're just, their current housing situation has changed. We're seeing, the cost of utilities putting homeowners at risk. So there's a whole series of challenges in a rural setting that need to be considered. And one of those, I would say, is, new housing developments, they need to be thinking seriously, making sure that they're near the big three. It's the fuel, it's the pharmacy, and it's the groceries. Like when we invest either publicly or privately in housing developments that are too far away from those essential services, that's when you're going to see chronic vacancies, because there are other obstacles that people with precarious housing experience, such as transportation and the costs associated with that. So that, I think, is something that you're going to see the coalition taking the bull by the horns, so to speak, to make sure that we're doing what we can to make this an election issue.
It's an issue with many facets, and we could talk all day about it, but I really do appreciate the two of you giving me some time here today. Did you want to add anything else about this just before we wrap up our municipal roundtable?
I would just extend an invitation to all the folks who are watching to invite citizens to ask questions when they do have an opportunity to talk to potential candidates at the door, to ask, what is being done about housing. I know we've had the opportunity to hear it at doors during elections. So just to make sure that citizens from Richmond County and from the town of Port Hawkesbury and beyond certainly ask those important questions at the door, because in order to make housing a priority, we definitely need to raise our voices and make that a communal voice so that we're heard.
Well said. Last word is to you, Warden Amanda Mombourquette.
Thanks, guys. So I guess the one thing that I would add is, and I think, Brenda, you touched on it earlier, how pervasive an issue this is. We're here talking today about affordable housing, but the housing crisis is bigger than just one piece of it in that sense. When we talk to businesses, which we just had the occasion to recently, they're talking about housing now, because even if they can find staff to attract, they can't find a place to house them. So it's inhibiting business growth, which is inhibiting the growth of our economy in general. We're doing our best to attract physicians through Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health. The number one challenge that we experience is where to house the physicians. So, we've got a survey, I think, going on right now through the Cape Breton Partnership. Essentially, we're creating a database with a mailing list for, landlords to say, yes, I have a short term here, or I have a long-term opportunity there, or just so that we can quickly, put the word out when we have a physician potentially coming to the community, to try to find them a place to live that's suitable to their needs. So this really is, it runs the spectrum from affordable housing all the way through to, kind of more family homes and executive level homes. It's a problem that we're facing. And to your point, Mayor Brenda, it's, great that people want to move here, but we need to give them the opportunity to be at home here.
With that, a wonderful discussion on an issue near and dear to many of us here. And that wraps up our very first municipal roundtable for Telile 27, hopefully the first of many. So thank you very much, Warden Amanda Mombourquette and Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. It's been great to talk to you today about this. And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks once again to my interview guests this week, Tom Sillaboy, Amanda Mombourquette, and Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. If you have any comments about what you've seen over the past hour, or some suggestions for future shows, including future editions of the Telile 24/7 Municipal Roundtable, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me directly. The phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email. The address is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly. The station phone number is 902-226-1928, and the best email to use is info@telile.tv. And don't forget that you can connect with Telile on social media as well. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our YouTube channel features every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one, and all of our interviews and feature stories. And don't forget that you can tune in to the Telile 24/7 podcast as well. The podcast channel is soundcloud.com/Telile. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you very much for tuning in this week. I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon with a brand new edition of Telile 24/7. Talk to you then.